Hello everyone, welcome to EduTap and welcome to Finance 360-degree session. So in today's session, we are going to discuss a very important direction of the Reserve Bank of India. So the RBI has released the new directions for the internal ombudsman. These are the internal ombudsman 2026 directions, which are very important from your examination perspective. If you are preparing for the RBI Grade A or if you are preparing for the RBI Grade B 2026, then the internal ombudsman is a very important topic. Okay, because from this the question has come in the previous years also, and the internal ombudsman, this is one of the hot topics that keeps in news. Okay, so the RBI has released the new directions for the internal ombudsman. What are the internal ombudsmen, as well as why it is required? What are the roles and responsibilities of the internal ombudsman? What are the criteria for selecting the internal ombudsman? All of these we are going to discuss in today's session. Okay, so let's get started. Give me a thumbs up if I am clearly audible and visible. And good morning to all of you. Okay, so the Reserve Bank of India has released new guidelines for the internal ombudsman in the banks, NBFCs and such. So let's get started without any delay. Give me a thumbs up if I'm clearly audible and visible. Okay, so let's get started. It seems that everything is fine. So now, before starting with the session, do subscribe to the YouTube channel of EduTap so that you continue getting the relevant videos, as well as join our Telegram channel in which you will get the PDF of the session. And the link for the Telegram channel is provided in the description box below. Okay, so in the Telegram channel of EduTap, you will get the PDF of today's session, and the link for the Telegram channel is provided in the description box below. So now, starting with today's topic, that is the Reserve Bank of India Commercial Banks Internal Ombudsman Directions 2026. So the RBI has released the Internal Ombudsman Directions for the commercial banks, for the small finance banks, for the payment banks, for the NBFCs, for the credit information companies. So there are various directions that have been released by the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, and in these different directions, the applicability has been notified, that on which commercial banks have to follow the internal ombudsman directions, which NBFCs have to follow the internal ombudsman directions. So all of this we will discuss, but first we will discuss that what is internal ombudsman. First you have to understand that what is the meaning of internal ombudsman, why is it required. Okay, so let's start with the discussion about the internal ombudsman, and then we will discuss about the nitty-gritties and such. So first of all, these directions we will discuss, but let's understand about the internal ombudsman. Let's say that Kavya is a customer of HDFC Bank. Okay, or let's say PNB Bank or State Bank of India. So Kavya is a customer of a bank, and she is maintaining in the HDFC Bank, she is maintaining the minimum balance in her account. But from Kavya's account, rupees 2000 has been deducted as a penalty for non-maintenance of the minimum balance. So first of all, is it correct that from Kavya's account, rupees 2000 has been deducted as a penalty for non-maintenance of the minimum balance while she was maintaining the required minimum balance? So this is wrong. So Kavya has raised the complaint with the bank. Kavya has raised the complaint with the bank. Now the complaint can be raised through the website. So through the HDFC bank's website, the Kavya has raised the complaint, or through the helpline number, through the customer care number, or through the email ID, Kavya can raise the complaint. Okay, similarly for the SBI also, through the website, through the helpline numbers, customer care numbers, through the email. Similarly for the Punjab National Bank also, through the website or through the helpline number, customer care number. So all these banks, all the major banks, they have their own website, they have the means for the complaints to be raised by the customers. Okay, so now you have raised the complaint with the bank. Kavya has raised the complaint with the bank. Now the bank will see the complaint, and the bank will have the responsibility to resolve the complaint within 30 days. Now let's say the bank has resolved the complaint, and the complaint will be marked as wholly resolved. So complaint is wholly resolved. That means the bank realized that, okay, the bank has done the mistake. Kavya was maintaining the minimum balance, but wrongfully the penalty was deducted. Okay, so the complaint will be resolved and the Kavya will be returned her money. The money will be returned to the Kavya. The penalty that was deducted will be returned to the Kavya. Let's say there is another complaint that is raised by XYZ person. Now the XYZ person has complained that there is delay in the disbursal of loan. There is delay in the disbursal of loan, and the loan should have been disbursed on 1st Jan 2026, but there has been a delay of 15 days. As well as the interest rate that is charged by bank is high. So now this complaint has been raised by the XYZ on the SBI website. Let's say this complaint has gone to the State Bank of India. The bank has received the complaint. Now the bank is partially resolving the complaint. Partially resolving the complaint means, let's say the bank is saying that yes, the delay has happened in the disbursal of loan, and for the delay the person is compensated. But the State Bank of India is saying that the interest rate is charged as per the decision that was taken, or interest rate is being charged as per the agreement that happened. Now, as per the agreement, only the State Bank of India is charging the interest rate, so it will not be decreased. So this is the partial resolution of the complaint. The bank is partially resolving the complaint because the bank is only resolving the first part of the complaint, that is the delay has happened in the loan, and the delay that has happened, for that the bank is compensating the person. But the bank is saying that okay, we are not able to decrease the interest rate because this is as per the agreement. The interest rate is as per the agreement. So there is partial resolution of the complaint. Or the bank can also reject the complaint. The bank can also reject the complaint. That, let's say the person is saying, the XYZ person is saying, or Kavya is saying that give me loan. But the bank is saying that you have not done your KYC, and again when we are reaching to you over mail, over mobile phone, when we are reaching to you for the know your customer guidelines for the KYC details, you are not providing the KYC details. So this complaint is rejected because the loan cannot be provided because of the mistake of the customer, or because of the no reply of the customer for the KYC. Okay, so the bank can resolve the complaint wholly. The bank can resolve the complaint wholly, or the bank can resolve the complaint partially. The bank can also reject the complaint. Now let's say if the bank is resolving the complaint wholly, that means the complaint is being resolved and there is no problem that will come. But if there is partial resolution of the complaint, or if the bank is rejecting the complaint, then it might be possible that the customer will raise the complaint and will not be satisfied with the answer that the bank has given. So in this case, when the bank, or when the branch of the bank, when the grievance redressal cell of the bank, or when the customer care center of the bank, when the customer service center of the bank, if they are resolving the complaint in the partial manner, or if they are rejecting the complaint, then this complaint is forwarded to the senior level. And let's say even then the nodal officer in the regional or the zonal office, nodal officer in the regional office, they have also rejected the complaint. They have also resolved the complaint only in the partial manner. Then the complaint will go to the internal ombudsman. Internal ombudsman is at the apex, is at the top of the grievance redressal mechanism of the bank. Okay, so the internal ombudsman, they are at the apex, they are at the top of the grievance redressal mechanism of the bank. Is that clear? I hope this is clear. I hope this is very much clear. If there is any confusion, kindly ask me. So basically, if the bank, the branch of the bank, or the grievance redressal cell of the bank, if they are rejecting the complaint, or if they are resolving the complaint in the partial manner, then this complaint will be forwarded to the senior level. And if the senior level, they also agree that okay, this complaint should be rejected, or this complaint should be only partially resolved, then this complaint is further forwarded to the internal ombudsman. That really, should the complaint be really rejected? Can we not resolve it completely? Can we not resolve it completely? If the complaint is partially resolved, is it resolved in the correct manner or not? So internal ombudsman is at the apex of the grievance redressal mechanism. Okay, internal ombudsman, it is at the apex of the grievance redressal mechanism of the bank, and the internal ombudsman has the responsibility to see the rejected complaints and to see the complaints that is partially resolved. Okay, Any confusion now? Clear? Chalo, nice. So this is the idea. Now I hope you have understood about the internal ombudsman. Internal ombudsman, it is apex authority. It is apex authority in the grievance redressal mechanism of a bank. Or if we are talking about the NBFCs, the internal ombudsman will be the apex authority in the grievance redressal mechanism of the NBFC. If there is any rejected complaint, if the complaint is rejected, or if the complaint is partially resolved, in these cases the internal ombudsman will review the complaints and will take the final decision that yes, the bank should reject the complaint or the bank should resolve the complaint. Okay, so this is the idea. Now these directions that has been released by the RBI in 2026 will be called Reserve Bank of India Commercial Banks Internal Ombudsman Directions 2026. And these directions shall come into force from immediate effect. Some of the clauses will come into effect from June 2026. Okay, but you have to focus on that the most of the directions have been immediately applied. Now these directions, that is the Reserve Bank of India Commercial Bank Internal Ombudsman Directions 2026, shall be applicable to commercial banks having 10 or more banking outlets in India as on March 31st, 2025. So all the commercial banks that have 10 or more banking outlets in India as on March 31st, 2025, on these commercial banks, the directions will be applied, and these commercial banks that have 10 or more banking outlets, they have to immediately follow these directions. Okay, as well as what about the commercial banks that get 10 or more banking outlets in India after March 31st, 2025. So these directions will be applied to the commercial bank which meets the 10 banking outlets or more criteria after 31st March 2025, but they will be provided the timeline of 6 months for meeting the directions. Okay, so basically these directions shall also be applicable to the commercial bank that have met the above mentioned criteria after March 31st, 2025, with effect from 6 months from meeting the eligibility criteria. With effect from 6 months after meeting the eligibility criteria, they have to follow these directions. I hope this is very much clear that all the commercial banks that have the 10 or more banking outlet in India as on 31st March 2025, they have to immediately start following these directions. But the banks that are having 10 or more banking outlets after March 31st, 2025, they will get 6 months to follow the directions. This is the idea. Okay. Now the appointment of internal ombudsman. Who can become internal ombudsman? Can you or me become the internal ombudsman? Who is the internal ombudsman? Internal ombudsman is a person who is hired by the bank, basically. So the internal ombudsman is a person who is appointed by the bank. Internal ombudsman shall either be a retired or serving officer in a rank that is equivalent to a general manager in the regulated entity that is under the purview, regulated entity of the Reserve Bank of India, that is under the internal ombudsman framework. Okay, so basically the internal ombudsman shall be either the retired officer or the serving officer in the position of general manager of the regulated entity under the RBI that is following the internal ombudsman framework, or the internal ombudsman can be a general manager that is retired from the post of, or that is serving at the post of the general manager in the financial sector regulatory body. Let it be the Reserve Bank of India, let it be SEBI, let it be the IRDI or PFRDA. So you can understand that let's say you get retired, you have become the manager, you have become the general manager in the Reserve Bank of India or SEBI or IRDI or PFRDA, and you retire as a general manager, then you can become the internal ombudsman. Then you can be hired as an internal ombudsman in the bank. Okay, and then again after the retirement also you will get a huge amount or good salary you will be getting as the internal ombudsman of the bank also. Or let's say you are serving in the regulated entity, you can leave your job. Let's say you are serving or you are working in the SDFC bank, that is a private bank. So you are working in the SDFC bank as the general manager and you have good experience working in a bank at the general manager post. So you can leave. If you are serving right now in SDFC, you can leave your job to work as the internal ombudsman in another bank. Okay, so this is the idea that first of all, if you are retired, then it is a good position. You can become the internal ombudsman if you had worked as a general manager in the regulated entity, or if you had worked in the financial sector regulatory body as a general manager. If you are serving officer right now, you are working in the SDFC bank, you can leave your position. You have to first leave your current position to take the charge as the internal ombudsman in some other bank. Okay, so internal ombudsman can be any retired officer or serving officer in the rank of general manager of the regulated entity under the purview of the internal ombudsman framework, or you retired from the financial sector regulatory body having necessary skills and experience of minimum 7 years of working. Remember this, minimum 7 years of work experience is required in areas such as banking, non-banking finance, regulation, supervision, payment and settlement system, credit information or consumer protection. So if you have the minimum experience of 7 years, then you can become the internal ombudsman in a bank. Okay. The internal ombudsman shall previously not have been employed, nor presently be employed by the bank or holding or associate or subsidiary of company of the bank. That means if you are retired from the SDFC bank, or if you are serving officer as a general manager in the SDFC bank, then you cannot become the internal ombudsman in the SDFC bank. If you are relinquishing your position, if you are leaving your position, then you can become the internal ombudsman in some other bank. Okay. So this is the idea. So if you were previously employed or connected with the bank or the holding of the bank or the subsidiary of the bank, then you cannot serve as an internal ombudsman in the same bank. The internal ombudsman shall not be over 70 years of age before the completion of the tenure. Okay, so before the completion of your tenure, usually the tenure of internal ombudsman is at least 3 years to the maximum of 5 years. So if your tenure is of 3 years or let's say 5 years, so in your tenure you should not be over 70 years. The person may work as the internal ombudsman. So you can work as an internal ombudsman in multiple regulated entities. So if you were retired from the SDFC or you were serving in the SDFC as a general manager, you can become the internal ombudsman in the State Bank of India, PNB, or any other bank with which you were not connected with. So a person may work as internal ombudsman in more than one regulated entity. So you can earn the income from more than one regulated entity simultaneously at the discretion, but at the discretion of the regulated entities concerned. They should agree to hire you. Okay, subject to the approval of the board or customer service committee or customer protection committee of the board of the appointing regulated entity. So let's say you want to become the internal ombudsman of SBI as well as Axis Bank. So these banks, the board of the bank or the customer service committee or customer protection committee of the board of the appointing regulated entity should agree. Then you can serve in multiple regulated entities. I hope this is clear. Now, appointment of deputy. So this was regarding internal ombudsman. Below the internal ombudsman is the deputy internal ombudsman. Okay, so deputy internal ombudsman, they also have to follow the same criteria. The deputy internal ombudsman shall either be a retired or serving officer in the rank of deputy general manager in the regulated entity. They must have served or they are serving in the regulated entity or a financial sector regulatory body as the deputy general manager. They must have a minimum experience of 5 years of working in areas such as bank, non-banking finance, regulation, supervision, etc. Okay, so they should have the minimum 5 years of working experience. The deputy internal ombudsman shall previously not have been employed nor presently be employed by the same bank or its subsidiary or its associate. Okay, the deputy internal ombudsman shall not be over 70 years of age before the completion of the tenure, as well as the important point here is that deputy internal ombudsman shall not be employed in more than one regulated entity simultaneously. Okay, so internal ombudsman, for that the minimum experience of 7 years is required. For the deputy internal ombudsman, minimum experience of 5 years is required. Internal ombudsman can serve in multiple regulated entities with the permission of the regulated entities, while the deputy internal ombudsman cannot work in more than one regulated entity. This is the idea. Now, number of internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman that can be hired. So every bank shall appoint at least one internal ombudsman, but on the basis of the volume and complexity of the complaints. Let's say a lot of complaints are getting rejected by the bank, or a lot of complaints are partially resolved by the banks, and a single internal ombudsman cannot review all these rejected or partially resolved complaints, then multiple internal ombudsman can be hired. Okay, so the customer service committee of the board, the customer service committee of the board shall determine at least once in a year the number of internal ombudsmen or deputy internal ombudsmen to be appointed, having due regard to the volume and complexity of the complaints that are received by the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman that is rejected by the bank or that is partially resolved by the bank. And ensuring that the internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman, they should have enough time to apply their knowledge, to apply their mind to resolve the rejected or partially resolved complaints, to see that okay, these rejected complaints, should they really be rejected by the bank? These partially resolved complaints, should they really be partially resolved or wholly resolved? Okay, so basically there should be enough of the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman that they can handle the volume and complexity of the complaints, and they should be able to give enough of the time to the rejected or partially resolved complaints to see that should they really be rejected or partially resolved. While appointing additional, let's say there are 3 internal ombudsmen, that is decided that we will hire 3 internal ombudsmen. So you can understand that the bank is working in different domains. The bank is providing loan, or the bank is providing the credit, we can say. The bank is taking the deposits from the customers, multiple kinds of deposits, saving account deposits, the fixed deposits and the recurring deposits and such. The bank is also engaged in the digital transactions like the UPI transactions, credit card or the debit cards and such. As well as the bank is also providing the bank assurance facility, where the bank is working as the agent of the bank or agent of the insurance company to sell the insurance products. So the bank also works as the bank, like bank also has the bank assurance facility, where the bank is working as the agent of the insurance company to sell the insurance policies. The bank is also providing the investment advice. So bank is working in different domains, and the complaint can be from the different domains that the bank is mis-selling, the bank is providing incomplete information in regards to the investment products or in regards to the insurance products, or the bank is not releasing the loan at time, the bank is charging higher interest rate in comparison to what was agreed and such, or the bank is not releasing the deposits on time. So the complaint can be in various domains, in various directions. So if multiple internal ombudsmen are being hired, they should be from different fields and they should have diverse experience. One internal ombudsman can be from the domain of the digital transactions. One internal ombudsman can be from the domain of credit facility, that they have the experience of providing loan into different categories and such. One internal ombudsman can be from the insurance segment, so that the internal ombudsman has the idea about the insurance products or investment products and such. So basically, while appointing multiple internal ombudsmen or additional internal ombudsmen, the need for diversity should be taken into account, so that the jurisdiction is also defined for the internal ombudsmen. The internal ombudsman shall report to the competent authority, that is the whole-time director or executive director in charge of the customer service vertical of the bank, as well as the internal ombudsman should also report to the customer service committee of the board of the bank functionally. Okay, the deputy internal ombudsman will report to the internal ombudsman. Internal ombudsman will report to the competent authority and to the CSC, that is the customer service committee. Now, any confusion? Chalo. Tenure of the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman. What should be the tenure? So the bank must ensure that the post of internal ombudsman is never vacant. During temporary absence of the internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman shall function as internal ombudsman. If both internal ombudsman and deputy internal ombudsman are absent, the bank may designate a serving officer of the general manager rank as internal ombudsman for a maximum period of 1 month only, with approval of the customer service committee of the board. So that means if internal ombudsman and deputy internal ombudsman, they both are absent, then the serving officer at the GM rank can serve as the internal ombudsman for the maximum period of 1 month only, with the approval of the customer service committee of the board. And such officer must not have any reporting relationship with the business vertical. That means once this serving officer as the general manager, if they are working as the internal ombudsman, they should not have any relationship with the business verticals, okay, because they are the ones that are now working as the internal ombudsman, so they should not be working in any other domain. Now the tenure shall be fixed. The tenure of the internal ombudsman or the deputy internal ombudsman shall be fixed for at least 3 years. They should be hired for at least 3 years, and their
tenure can be extended but shall not exceed 5 years. So 3 years to 5 years, minimum 3 years, maximum 5 years. Okay. The bank must initiate the fresh appointment process at least 3 months before the expiry of the tenure and ensure a reasonable overlap between the old internal ombudsman and the new internal ombudsman, so that the old internal ombudsman can inform the new internal ombudsman about the different things. Okay. Next is that the internal ombudsman or the deputy internal ombudsman cannot be removed before completion of their tenure without the customer service committee approval. Okay, so they cannot be removed from their position. They can only be removed with the permission of the customer service committee approval of the board. In case of vacancy due to unavoidable reasons, let's say the internal ombudsman due to unforeseen circumstances, there was an accident or something happened to the internal ombudsman, the internal ombudsman has resigned by themselves, they were, because of their health issues, they were not able to continue. So because of any of the reasons, if there is vacancy due to unavoidable reason, the bank shall inform the Reserve Bank of India within 10 working days of the date of vacancy and appoint a new internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman within 3 months from the date of vacancy. So they have to inform RBI within 10 days of vacancy and they have to hire a new one within 3 months from the date of vacancy. The customer service committee of the board of the bank shall determine the structure of emoluments, facilities, benefits that will be provided to the internal ombudsman or the deputy internal ombudsman that cannot be reduced later on. Okay. Now, roles and responsibilities of the internal ombudsman and deputy internal ombudsman. Now you will be able to understand better that what kind of complaints they handle. Okay. So first of all, the office of the internal ombudsman shall not handle complaints received directly. That means the internal ombudsman or the deputy internal ombudsman, they cannot receive the direct complaints from the complainant, from the customer. First, the complaints. If the customers are raising the complaint, these complaints will be handled by the bank branch, by the grievance redressal cell and such. If the bank is rejecting the complaint or the bank is only partially resolving the complaint, then these rejected complaints or partially resolved complaints will go to the senior level, to the nodal officer at the regional zone. After the senior level, to the nodal officer or to the principal nodal officer, if they are also rejecting or partially resolving the complaint, that means they are agreeing with the decision that was taken by the lower levels. So then these rejected complaints or partially resolved complaints will go to internal ombudsman. That means internal ombudsman, they should not handle the complaints received directly from the customer. It shall deal with the complaints that have already been examined by the bank and partially resolved or rejected or being wholly rejected by the bank. So those partially rejected, those partially resolved and the wholly rejected complaints should go to internal ombudsman for further review. If the internal ombudsman finds that no, these complaints should not be rejected, so bank will handle the complaints. If the internal ombudsman thinks that the complaint should be wholly resolved, then the bank will have to handle the complaint. If the internal ombudsman thinks that no, the bank has taken the right decision and the complaint should be rejected or should be partially resolved only, then the complaint will be then the answer will be given to the complainant. Okay, then the bank will reply to the complainant. Okay. So the office of the internal ombudsman shall not handle complaints received directly. They shall only handle such complaints that has been examined by the bank but have been partially resolved or being wholly rejected. While the internal ombudsman may decide any or all complaints, the power. So internal ombudsman, they can decide on all the complaints that is rejected or partially resolved in any of the domain, deposit, lending, digital transactions. So complaint that is raised from any of the domain, from any of the vertical, the internal ombudsman can handle such complaints. But deputy internal ombudsman, they have a certain category only. Okay, so the power of the deputy internal ombudsman to decide the complaints may be defined under the policy approved by the customer service committee of the board. So internal ombudsman has complete power to see all the rejected and to see all the partially resolved complaints, but the deputy internal ombudsman powers are defined by the customer service committee of the board. The internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman may recommend compensation to the complainant in line with the RBI's existing compensation guidelines or as per the bank's compensation policy, that okay, if the bank has wrongfully charged some fees that should not have been charged, if the bank has taken a higher interest rate than the bank should have taken, or if the bank is wrongfully or doing the mis-selling of the product of the investment advice was wrong, or there was the investment advice that was missold. It was said that this investment product is for long term, while the investment product was not for the long term, it was for the short term and such. So if there is any mis-selling activity that is done by the bank and such, so the compensation can be recommended by the deputy internal ombudsman or the internal ombudsman to the complainant, in line with the RBI's existing compensation guidelines, as well as in case the consumer has faced any consequential loss or loss of time, expenses incurred, harassment or mental agony. So in this case, internal ombudsman may recommend additional compensation also as per the RBI integrated ombudsman scheme. So basically, internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman, they can recommend the compensation in case the bank has done something wrong, and the internal ombudsman, they can also recommend additional compensation also in case of the harassment or mental agony that is faced by the customer. Okay. Next is the role and responsibility. The Office of Internal Ombudsman shall conduct quarterly analysis of the complaints, including product-wise complaints. So that means in the loan category, in the deposit category, in the digital transactions category, in the internet banking category or UPI category, in the bank assurance or the insurance and investment advisory category. So in different product categories, what are the regular complaints that are coming? Let's say the regular complaints are regarding the delay that is happening in the loan, or extra charges that are deducted, penalties that are deducted. Okay, so the Office of Internal Ombudsman shall conduct quarterly analysis of complaints, including the product wise complaints, the category wise complaints, the mis-selling or the excess penalties that are taken or excess money that is taken, consumer group wise. From senior citizens the complaint are coming, from rural area, from urban area, from MSMEs, from the corporates, from where the complaints are coming majorly. And region wise patterns can also be seen, that mostly the complaints are coming from the East India, Northeast India, let's say. So why the complaints are coming from the Northeast India? Because maybe the branches of the Northeast India, they are not able to function properly of the bank. Okay, and provide inputs for policy level intervention so that the root cause can be identified and the root cause can be handled, so that these regular complaints or these frequent complaints can be reduced. Okay, the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman shall have read-only access to the RBI's complaint management system, because I hope you know that if the customer is not satisfied with the reply of the bank, if the customer is not getting the reply within 30 days from the bank, then the customer can go to the RBI ombudsman with the complaint. So let's say that the bank rejected the complaint, the internal ombudsman also agreed that the complaint should be rejected, or the bank partially resolved the complaint, internal ombudsman also agreed that the complaint should be partially rejected. The customer was not happy with the resolution, with the partial resolution or with the rejection, customer can go to the RBI ombudsman. So the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman shall have read-only access to the RBI's complaint management system, so that the internal ombudsman can see that okay, the customer is going to the RBI ombudsman and the decision that will be taken by the RBI ombudsman. RBI ombudsman can say that this complaint should not have been rejected. What are the grounds for rejecting the complaint? Then the internal ombudsman will have to answer, then the bank will have to answer. Okay. So this is the idea, that the internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman, they should have the read-only access to the RBI's complaint management system to stay informed about the decisions of the RBI ombudsman. The bank shall seek such access for the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman from the Consumer Education and Protection Department of the RBI. Next is deputy internal ombudsman shall functionally report to the internal ombudsman. Now procedure for the complaint redressal by internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman. So this is the last a few points that we have to discuss. So first of all, the bank shall implement a fully automated complaint management system with access provided to the internal ombudsman and deputy internal ombudsman. All the partially resolved or wholly rejected complaints, they shall auto escalated to the internal ombudsman. All these partially rejected or partially resolved or wholly rejected complaints, they should be auto escalated to the internal ombudsman. At least 10 days should be given, for review of these rejected complaints or these partially resolved complaints, at least 10 days should be given for the review of such complaints in case where the resolution timeline is decided by RBI, NPCI or card networks. Let's say for the card transactions, the resolution timeline of the complaint is, let's say, 40 days or let's say X days. So at least 10 days should be given to the internal ombudsman to review the rejected or partially resolved complaints, where the timeline is 30 days. So normally 30 days is the timeline, that within 30 days the complaint has to be resolved by the bank. Within 30 days the complaint has to be resolved by the bank. So at least here within 20 days of receipt of the complaint, within 20 days of receipt of the complaint by the bank, the complaint should be forwarded to the internal ombudsman in case the complaint is rejected or partially resolved. That means again 10 days should be given, at least 10 days should be given to the internal ombudsman to review the rejected or partially resolved complaints, so that within 30 days the reply can be sent to the customer that yes, the complaint is rejected and such. Okay, so let's say there are 30 days in which the customer complaint has to be resolved and customer has to be given a reply. So within 20 days, so 20 days is basically the bank has to reject the complaint, to wholly resolve the complaint or to partially resolve the complaint. So after 20 days, that is within 20 days of receipt of the complaint, the complaint should be sent to the internal ombudsman in case the complaint is rejected or partially resolved. Then the internal ombudsman will have approximately 10 days to give, or it has some days to give its answer that okay, it should be rejected or not. Okay, and then after a few days the customer should be replied. Okay, now the CMS, that is complaint management system, shall classify complaints only as fully resolved, partially resolved or wholly rejected. So partially resolved and wholly rejected complaints will go to internal ombudsman for review. Now there are certain complaints that is outside the internal ombudsman purview, that is complaints related to corporate fraud, misappropriation that is not impacting the customers, suggestions, commercial decisions that is taken by the business. But if the commercial decisions are related to service deficiency, that means the commercial decision was taken by the bank and that is leading to service deficiency, then the complaint can be handled by the internal ombudsman if the complaint is rejected or partially resolved. Okay, internal administration, if the complaint is regarding the internal administration, HR, staff remuneration matters, then it is outside the purview of internal ombudsman. Matters pending or decided by judicial or quasi-judicial bodies, that means if there is a matter that is pending in the court or arbitration center, then the internal ombudsman cannot handle such kind of complaints. Disputes for which remedy has been provided under the Credit Information Company Regulation Act 2005. So in this case also the complaint cannot be handled by the internal ombudsman. In the case of first and second point, rejected or partially resolved complaints under corporate fraud, misappropriation or suggestion and commercial decisions shall still be forwarded to the internal ombudsman, so that the internal ombudsman can examine that is there any service deficiency that has happened, because internal ombudsman basically receives the complaints, partially resolved or rejected complaints that are related to service deficiency. Okay, now last few points. So the complaint shall not be closed by the same branch. See, this is important, that the complaint shall not be closed by the same branch. Let's say there is bank A to which, like, there is branch A that has charged you certain unfair fees. So you have raised the complaint and this complaint has gone to branch A that the branch A has charged you unfair fees on your deposits or on your loan. Now the bank A will see the data, will see your account, and the bank A will realize that actually the unfair fees has been charged mistakenly. There is unfair fees or there is some additional fees that is charged from the customer. The bank A will return the money to you. So the bank A has returned the money that was charged. Okay, now the bank A has resolved the problem, but the bank A cannot close the complaint. Why is it so? Because it is said that there should be a neutral third party that should verify that actually the bank has taken the necessary steps in case of the complaint, and after the neutral third party has done the verification, after some separate department has done the verification, then the separate department, the third party, will close the complaint, so that the same branch, that is on which the complaint is posed, on which the complaint is handling, that same branch cannot close the complaint. So if the complaint is against this branch can resolve the complaint, but it cannot close the complaint. The neutral third party, the separate department, has to close the complaint, so that there is accountability that is maintained and integrity that is maintained. So the branch is not just closing the complaint just to close the complaint and just to get away with the complaint, just to not let the complaint go to the higher levels and such. Okay, so if the complaint is against the branch A, it cannot close the complaint. Some neutral third party has to verify and then close the complaint, that yes, the bank has handled the complaint, the bank branch has handled the complaint, and now after verifying that the complaint is resolved, then only the complaint will be closed by a separate third party. Partially resolved or rejected complaints must be reviewed at senior level before sending it to the internal ombudsman. So the senior level, that is the nodal officer at the regional zone or such principal nodal officer, they should first review the rejected complaint before sending it to the internal ombudsman. Internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman shall examine the complaints based on bank records. They can seek additional information, they can interact with the bank officials, they can obtain written or oral submission from the complainant also. The bank shall ensure that the final decision is communicated to the complainant within a period of 30 days from the date of receipt of the complaint by the bank. They cannot take more than this time. So within 20 days, they have to forward the rejected or partially resolved complaints to the internal ombudsman, and internal ombudsman will take certain days, and within the period of 30 days, the communication has to be given to the complainant clearly. Okay, where the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman upholds the decision of the bank to reject the complaint or to partially resolve the complaint, that okay, the bank has taken the correct decision to reject this complaint or only to partially resolve this complaint, the decisions are correct. In this case, the reply to the complainant should explicitly state that the said complaint has been reviewed by the internal ombudsman or the deputy internal ombudsman, and there should be written reasoned decision. That means the internal ombudsman, deputy internal ombudsman, they agree with the decision or they have seen the decision. For complaints that are partially resolved or wholly rejected after examination by the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman, the bank shall advise the complainant that the complainant has the option of approaching the RBI ombudsman for redressal, and the bank in its reply should also provide the URL, the link of Reserve Bank's complaint management system portal for online filing of the customer complaint, and physical address and email address of the centralized receipt processing center should also be given. That means if the bank is rejecting the complaint or partially resolving the complaint, and internal ombudsman has agreed that yes, this complaint should be rejected or partially resolved only, then the reply should be given to the complainant. And in the reply to the complainant that we are rejecting your complaint or we are only this is the partial resolution of the complaint, so the complainant should also be informed that the complainant has the means to complain to the RBI or to go to the RBI ombudsman, so that the complainant can go to the RBI ombudsman and there is transparency and accountability that is maintained. So the bank should not hide the things that okay, the complainant has the opportunity to go to the RBI ombudsman, because if the bank is sure, the bank has itself seen the complaint, the senior level has seen the complaint, internal ombudsman has seen the complaint, and then the complaint is rejected, so the bank should be sure that yes, the complaint has had to be rejected. So now if the complaint is going to the RBI ombudsman, there should be no problem on the bank side, right? So the bank should inform about the option of approaching the RBI ombudsman, should give the URL link of the RBI bank of the Reserve Bank CMS portal and such. Now, additional information. So the bank shall within 5 working days of appointment of a new internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman should inform the Consumer Education and Protection Department of Reserve Bank of India. So within 5 days of appointing the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman, the RBI should be informed. The Consumer Education and Protection Department of RBI should be informed. The bank shall put in place a system for periodic report on functioning of internal ombudsman. So basically a periodic report has to be sent to the Consumer Education and Protection Department of RBI on the functioning of internal ombudsman on the quarterly basis. So let's say Jan to March, this was the first quarter. So within 15th of April, on or before 15th of April, the quarterly report should be sent to the Consumer Education and Protection Department of the RBI. Okay, so quarterly reports have to be sent on the functioning of internal ombudsman, and the quarterly report should be sent on or before the 15th of the month following the quarter. Next, internal audit department of the bank shall conduct an audit of the implementation, that these directions are being implemented or not. So on an annual basis, the internal audit department should do the audit. The office of the internal ombudsman may preferably be placed in the head office or corporate office of the bank. The internal ombudsman, any confusion till now? Okay. Now the internal ombudsman shall be designated as a permanent invitee to the meetings of the customer service committee of the board. The internal ombudsman shall furnish periodic reports. So internal ombudsman has to give periodic reports to the customer service committee of the board. Preferably, this periodic report should be on the quarterly basis. But if quarterly report is not given, then at least on the half-yearly basis, the periodic report should be submitted by the internal ombudsman on its activities. Okay. The decision of the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman can be overruled only with the approval of the competent authority, that is the whole-time director and such, and shall be placed before the CSC for review if the competent authority has overruled the decision of the internal ombudsman. Internal ombudsman said that the complaint should not be rejected, but the competent authority, that is the whole-time director or the executive in charge in the customer service vertical, they have said, the competent authority has said, no, we are going to reject the complaint. So internal ombudsman decision is not taken into account. So in case the internal ombudsman or deputy internal ombudsman decision is overruled, it can be overruled only by the competent authority and shall be placed for review in front of the CSC. Okay, that why the competent authority has rejected. An analysis. So on the quarterly basis, the internal ombudsman should provide an analysis of the top 5 complaint categories. Mis-selling maybe, the unfair charges are being taken, the digital transactions are the problem, and there is a lot of problem that is coming in the credit card transactions. There is a lot of problem that is coming in the loan disbursal, delay is happening. So an analysis of the top 5 complaint categories and the remedial measures taken to prevent the recurrence of such complaints. This kind of report, this kind of analysis has to be placed in front of the CSC on the quarterly basis. Okay, so this is the idea. Now the last point is that I have told you that this internal ombudsman directions, it has been released for the commercial banks, for the small finance banks, for the payment banks, NBFC, non-bank prepaid payment instrument, and credit information companies. So for all these, there are different directions that have been released. Now all the directions, they are stating the same points. All these 6 directions, they are stating the same point, just the applicability is different. Okay. For the commercial banks, we have seen that those commercial banks that have 10 or more of the banking outlets in India, so these commercial banks, they have to follow the internal ombudsman directions. Similarly, these directions shall be applicable to small finance banks having 10 or more banking outlets in India as on March 31st, 2025. And if after March 31st, 2025, they are getting 10 or more banking outlets, then they will get 6 months to follow the directions. Okay. Similarly, these directions shall be applicable on the payment bank having 10 or more banking outlets in India as on March 31st, 2025. And if they achieve 10 or more banking outlets after March 31st, 2025, then they will get the 6 months to follow these directions. These directions shall be applicable to NBFCs excluding housing finance company, excluding the core investment company, excluding the infrastructure debt finance company, and excluding the infrastructure finance company, infrastructure debt fund, excluding the non-operative financial holding company, primary dealers, mortgage guarantee company. So excluding these, all the other NBFCs that are the deposit taking NBFCs with 10 or more branches, or non-deposit taking NBFCs with asset size of 5,000 crores and above having public customer interface. So all the other NBFCs fulfilling these criterias, they have to follow the internal ombudsman guidelines. Okay, so the NBFCs excluding these, the other NBFCs that are the deposit taking NBFCs with 10 or more branches, or non-deposit taking NBFCs with asset size of 5,000 crore and above and having public customer interface, they have to follow the directions. Okay, these directions shall be applicable to non-bank prepaid payment instruments like the Paytm that provides the wallets digital wallets. So non-bank prepaid payment instrument, okay, like the wallets, digital wallets. So the non-bank prepaid payment instrument issuers and that are having more than 1 crore prepaid payment instruments, that are having more than 1 crore wallets, we can say, outstanding as on March 31st, 2025 or thereafter, they also need to follow the directions. So non-bank prepaid payment instrument issuers that are issuing the digital wallets and such, okay, and they have more than 1 crore of prepaid payment instruments, they need to follow the internal ombudsman directions. That means they need to hire the internal ombudsman and the directions we have discussed. The provisions of these directions shall also be applicable on the credit information companies. So rather than reading all these separately, the directions are same, just the applicability you have to remember. Any confusion? So rather than taking 6 or 7 sessions on the different directions, on the different internal ombudsman directions, I've taken this one session in which I have informed about the applicability. Okay. So if it is written as on March 31st, 2025, remember that after, if the criteria is achieved after March 31st, 2025, so just they are given 6 months to start following the directions. They are given 6 months to start following the direction. Okay. So this is the applicability. The small finance bank that have 10 or more banking outlets, they need to have the internal ombudsman. The payment bank that have 10 or more banking outlet, they need to follow the internal ombudsman directions. The non-bank prepaid payment instruments that have 1 crore, more than 1 crore of prepaid payment instruments, they need to follow the internal ombudsman directions. Non-banking finance companies that are the deposit taking with 10 or more branches, or they are the non-deposit taking with asset size of 5,000 crore and above and having the public customer interface, they need to follow the internal ombudsman directions. They need to have the internal ombudsman. So this is the idea. Now this is the first question. I hope you will be easily able to answer this question. Okay. So this is the first question. Try to answer this question. In this question, the eligibility and appointment conditions have been asked. So you should know that what are the appointment condition for the internal ombudsman. Okay. And remember, here we are talking about internal ombudsman, not deputy internal ombudsman. Next is the second question is that Reserve Bank of India non-bank financial companies internal ombudsman directions 2026 shall be applicable to deposit taking NBFCs that have dash or more branches, or non-deposit taking NBFCs that have the asset size of dash crore and above, subject to having the public customer interface as on March 31st, 2025. And if they follow these criteria after March 31st, if they get, let's say right now they have 9 branches, let's say till March 31st they have 9 branches, in June 2025 or in Jan 2026 they get 1 more branch, so now they have 10 branches. So after March 31st, 2025, if they get the 10 branches, they will get the 6 months timeline to follow the directions. Okay, so this is the idea. Chalo. Now try to answer this question. So this is it for today. Thank you very much for joining the session. I hope you understood the key ideas. The directions are lengthy, but remember that there were 6 different directions that were released, and I tried to bring all the important materials in this one session so that you have covered the different 6 directions for the different units. Okay, so the other guidelines are same. Applicability I have told you. Okay, and just the point, just this point you have to remember. Just this is the extra point that you have to remember. The same is going to be for all the entities, that if they are following the direction, if they are following the applicability and they meet the mentioned criteria after March 31st, 2025 with effect from 6 months from meeting the eligibility criteria, they have to follow the internal ombudsman direction. Okay. So this is the idea. So if the small finance bank, if the payment bank, if the NBFC, they are following the criteria after March 31st, if they are following the criteria after March 31st, 2025, so they will get 6 months after achieving the eligibility criteria, they will get 6 months time to start following the internal ombudsman directions. Okay. So this is it. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining. If there is any confusion, you can write in the comment section. And this is it for today. Internal ombudsman directions are always very important from the RBI perspective, from the exam perspective. Okay. So thank you.